What's up, everyone? My name is Wayne Mueller. I'm the pitmaster, third generation owner of Louie Mueller BBQ. Welcome to my home. Why don't you come in? Let's take a look. So we've stepped into our main dining hall. This was built in 1900. We moved in 1959. Not much has changed. Floors, walls, ceilings are all still original. The furniture that we have here is from my grandfather. We've been utilizing it since '59 as well. Old space, high ceilings, no air conditioning, no heating. Some of the things you'll notice about the restaurant is this wall in particular. We have quite a few business cards. This started out as a community board back in like 1959. We've had business cards going up for the last 65 years. We have boxes of them, literally. I don't throw any of those away because each one represents a personal experience of the individual who's represented by the card. For me, that's a very precious place. Not much has really changed. We still serve the way we always have, counter service. Behind the line looks a little bit different, but our service pit is still in use every day. We'll see it in a second. We have an old jukebox in the corner that hasn't played any music probably in 50 years. Apparently, this environment's a little too tough for LPs. Let's go back into the service space and kitchen. This is our service block, and this is our oldest pit. This one was built in 1946. Has a little bit of history. My grandfather needed some plate steel in 1946. We're coming out of a wartime economy. The U.S. Navy was cutting up some of their old naval vessels out of World War I and World War II for plate steel. So he drove down to Galveston, picked it up. It saw some sort of maritime action somewhere. Don't have a name, don't know where. It's our piece of Americana. While we use it to keep sausage hot during service, we cook all of our sausage by looping the links over these wooden dowels. We have some angle iron about this high that runs the length of this pit. And so we'll hang as many as 320 links at a time. Then we'll take them out, we'll spin them around, we'll move them around based on where the hot and cold spots are. Usually takes about an hour and a half to cook up a batch of sausage. This is some of today's offerings. So we have jalapeno and original going today. In addition to sausage, we also cook all of our spare ribs, all of our chicken. If we do any baby back ribs, those sort of things, turkey breast, they'll all be cooked on here as well. Now this is an offset, though it's a vertical offset, which makes it a little different than the horizontal offsets, which we cook our heavy reds in. This one cooks more like an inverted waterfall, so it's more like a direct heat, except it's just convected air it's rising up from the bottom, offset coming up. I don't ever see this one going away. It's a beautiful piece. Underneath here, you can kind of see the bases and legs of our original butcher blocks. These guys have seen continuous use since the late 1800s. My grandfather picked them up from a meat market that went out of business the same year that he opened up his grocery store. These were moved in here in '59, and so they've been in continuous operation since. They're fairly worn on top, which is why we have a new top on them, but they're not going anywhere. They are definitely a part of the family. Back here you can see this offset box. Literally, it's bolted on to the main chamber. It's a fairly large box. There's been no modifications done to this pit. None at all. Since its origination, really in the alleyway across the street behind my grandfather's grocery store. It was there for 13 years before we moved it over here, and it's been cooking the same way since. This is where we cook the heavy reds. So the heavy reds are brisket, beef ribs. You can see those dudes are on right now. The last what we have left, these are closing in on being able to pull them. We'll pull them, wrap them, rest them, and they'll get probably about 2.5 hours of rest before service. So they'll be nice and buttery for us. This first chamber is generally reserved for beef ribs every day. This back two chambers are reserved for brisket every day. We'll cook brisket starting at 4 in the morning. They usually come off about 5. They'll be wrapped to finish the process. Then they'll rest in one of our cabinets overnight. We wrap them again in the morning, and then they're ready for service by 11. The kitchen itself really hasn't changed much. I mean, we have a main prep table, a single oven stove, a sausage prep area. You can see it's sort of set up ready to stuff. The sausage recipe was my father's recipe from 1963. It's been around a while. What we have here is a horizontal offset, just like any other horizontal offset where the airflow is more like a river than it is anything else. It flows sideways, which was necessary to cook brisket in multiple temperature zones. This, because it's masonry, acts completely differently than an all steel edifice. So, for example, a 1,000-gallon steel propane tank, you'll heat that pit up. There's not a whole lot of airflow going through, not like our airflow. If you can notice, we have basically a chimney stack, which means we got a 5-foot wide exhaust stack where most are 12 inches, maybe 18 inches. We're moving a lot of air. We're truly cooking with convected air. That's because the masonry acts as an insulator, not a conductor. All the steel acts as a conductor in all propane tanks. So you heat it up, it radiates heat back. It cooks more like an oven than it does a convection oven. This doesn't retain much heat at all. There's a little bit on the surface, on our cap and lids. It doesn't project nearly enough heat to cook anything. So we have to rely on hot air, which means we have to have a flame going all the time. We can't rely just on coals. It doesn't expand the air enough, which pushes the air through this system, and it'll die out right before it gets to the stack. So this is different. We use a lot more wood. It's also because it's so hot in there, we have to rotate our meat every 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the size of the brisket. We're adding logs maybe every 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes more often, just depending on how seasoned the wood is. This is the way I inherited it, and this is the way, in my opinion, this is the last bit of a early 20th century, mid 20th century culture that is dying out. So I think it's incumbent on me, for as long as I can, to continue doing it this way, because once this is gone, it doesn't come back. That part of our culture has effectively been eviscerated. I have to admit, I have my own reasoning for doing this, but in a broader text, I think that this is also a very unique part of Texas culture, just like cooking in a similar fashion in the Carolinas would be a very instinctive part of that culture. You don't want that to go away, because then you lose your identity as a community, as a people. This is a tradition for us. This is a Texas tradition as far as I'm concerned, and it's something we're saving. Oh. We rest these in a passive environment, more like a cooler. Okay. We use a Cambro transportation holder. These bones will continue to break down and render the fat and the connective tissue for still a couple hours. They get extremely hot. So I found that if I try to rest them in a heated environment, they just dry out, they overcook. There's multiple reasons why we do this. The best one though is by taking out a bone, the consumption to bone ratio is higher for each bone served. So there's more meat per bone for every one served. So it's a better consumable buy for our guests than it would be if we served 3, because it's a smaller percentage of the total weight is bone mass. Right? So they're paying for something they can actually eat instead of just look at or give to their dog. It's bigger, it's meant to share. It's one of those Texas iconic, everything's bigger in Texas kind of things. So it sort of fits that mold. That's why we do it. Keeping this as much original, as true to who we were when we started as possible, I think is paramount, because it's what people come here for. So many people come here for. What we hear a lot is, this is what I imagined some quintessential small town Texas barbecue joint to be. Everything about this place is a throwback to a completely different time. I credit my father honestly. He was the genius in deciding not to make any sort of aesthetic changes when he took over from his dad. He really wanted to keep things as original as possible. Taking this over was a fear of mine. Growing up, being the oldest child, I felt that there was going to be a responsibility, a franchise tag placed on me. And the reason I took this position with him, he adopted me when I was just under 2. He married my mother. You know, the third wheel coming into a family isn't often treated the best. My father never treated me that way. He always treated me exactly as he treated the rest of the kids. And being the oldest, he had expectations for me that I knew that I had to meet. Like working here, starting to work here when I was 8 years old, because he worked at his father's grocery store when he was 8 years old. It was just the way small towns handled things. And I hated it at the time, you know, but it instilled a certain work ethic that just never leaves. The fact that he took care of me the way he did, the fact that he embraced me the way he did, and the fact that he gave me an opportunity in life the way he had, I felt I owed him tremendously. He received a James Beard Award for an America's Classic, and I think it was a culmination for him of a lifetime of work and effort. And I think that it really, for the first time, he truly felt like this is something worth keeping, something worth protecting. And so his push was really not so much, okay, Wayne, you do whatever you want to do. It was really more of, can you come back home and help me with this? Now my history, now my experience and my path is bringing with me a tool set that neither my grandfather or my father had, which I think could be beneficial to the business and help the business in moving into the 21st century. My father did what was best for the business during his tenure. My grandfather did what was best for the business in his tenure, and they all have specialized skill sets. What I'm most sad about is the fact that he didn't get to experience the absolute meteoric rise of the very cuisine that I think he was instrumental in laying the foundation for. He passed away just before all of this stuff exploded. And if anybody anywhere should have been around to enjoy some of that, it should have been him. What we need to do is we need to have our own cut that is equally, I think, iconic of Texas as brisket is. We've been cooking beef ribs for a long time in different iterations. And so I decided to change our cut, change our process a little bit on our beef ribs with the explicit goal of this being our Franklin brisket, if you will. This is going to be our calling card, and this is going to distinguish us from everyone else. We did receive a Best Ribs in America, which always gone to pork ribs. We received the best barbecue dish in the world, the most delicious bite of food in the world. It was like the first iteration going out was Aaron and his brisket, and that just changed people's lives. This beef rib turned out and did the same sort of thing for people. And it's what my dad had done forever, so in a way, it's kind of like, oh, to you, dude, you know, this is all because of you. I see no reason to change it, is my point. Smoke, salt, pepper, a high quality meat, and the fat that they produce. When they sing, it's a symphony and it's angel singing. We have no gauges on any of our pits. You're doing a lot by feel, time and feel. And teaching people to use these as an instrument is not the easiest thing to do, but if you can get people calibrated the same as you and have them understand exactly what you're looking for, they will never need instrumentation again. So that's a beautiful thing. So the wood we use is the standard post oak wood. And the reason we use post oak is because there's a lot of it around here. It's a very prominent hardwood in this area. Central Texas and post oak are married, the same way that Tennessee and hickory are married. It's a regional thing. This is what grows here. It doesn't have a very pungent aftertaste, say, that a conifer would have if you tried to smoke with it. The sap is just overwhelming. It leaves a real bitter taste. It's not something you want to use. For the longest time, up until very recently, we would bring in wood and we would split our wood here in-house. Chief Firewood is bringing us two things. We can count on the wood being seasoned and sized correctly every time. It also gives me much more time to have my guys in the kitchen focusing on, let's get better at making a higher quality product each and every time. It just becomes another ingredient for us that we can count on as any other brand ingredient would be. I know that this is a high quality fuel source that I can count on each and every time. Wood is the pivotal point in making sure that fire stays consistent. So for me, it starts with wood and meat. Add in the people, add in the spices, add in the process, and then you get the outcome. But without the meat and without the wood, you got nothing. You can have the best cooks in the world, you got nothing. So Javier and Chief Firewood has really helped us to, I think, stabilize all kitchen operations.